Okay, so this poem is essentially setting out the problems that have been going on in Rome before Augustus came to power, and then sort of the reasons why things have been going so horribly wrong for the Romans up until this point. Being a Horace poem, it's relatively straightforward to read and understand. However, I'll read it with you. So the first things he points out here is that there have been ancestral crimes. So these are crimes before Augustus came to power. So though innocent, you'll pray the gods for Roman till you restore their temples, their crumbling shrines. So he's pointing out here that the gods in Rome had been neglected. That's as straightforward as that, to be completely honest. Excuse me, with images, black smoke besmirched. Because you hold yourself less than the gods you rule, hence your beginning to this ascribe your end. Neglected the gods have visited many woes upon grief-stricken Italy. So because of the gods being ignored and the temples have gone to ruin and all the rest of it, that's why the Republic was as chaotic as it was. This is why there's been all the civil wars. That's why Egypt, if you follow Horace's previous explanation, it's why Egypt was like attacking Rome, so on and so forth. It's all because they've neglected the gods and they're being punished for it. Already twice Menelaus and Pacorus banned to suppress our unhallowed onslaughts, and Grin having added our booty to their scanty ornaments. The idea that Rome had been invaded and attacked as a result of the gods neglecting them. Almost purified with civil strife by Dacian and Ethiopian was our Rome destroyed. So basically the same basic argument. The latter fearsome with his fleet, more skilled with the Dacian with his arrow flight. In sin, stained first the marriage bed, the family and the home. Not only have they been neglecting the gods, but everybody is acting less than, I'm trying to think of the right word, morally. That will do. Sprung from this fountain, disastrous floods has rolled across our fatherland and populace. So because everybody is being a bit naughty, alongside neglecting of the gods, everything has gone horribly wrong. So the maiden ready for marriage delights, to learn Ionic dances and acquires accomplishments, to her very fingertips her thoughts run all on unchaste love. Soon she's hunting young adulterers at her husband's parties, not choosing partners for forbidden pleasures, snatched in haste with the lights out. So in other words, there's a load of women going around being extra friendly to lots of other men, which is really bad because it's sort of creating sin in Rome. But going openly with whoever asks with her husband in a know. Her husband knows what she's doing and does not care. Whether it's a salesman or a Spanish ship's captain, big spender purchasing her shame. Not from such parents sprang the youths who stained the sea with Punic blood. So that's a reference to the Punic Wars. So he's kind of saying, this generation is absolutely appalling because everybody's going around sort of having sex with each other. Everyone's committing adultery. Everything's going horribly wrong. And they're not like the old generation. This is very similar to what you hear in varying tabloids in today's society, which is always the argument of, well, today's people are really awful and it's the parents' fault and their parents and so on and so forth. People were so much better before. This is basically the point he's making. For these, mainly offspring of a rustic stock, i.e. they were hard-working from the soil. Sons of soldiers taught to turn the soil with Sablaean mattocks homeward would then, obeying their strict mother's call, so they listened to their mothers, bearing their load of timber for the fire, while waning sun shifts shadows on the hills, frees up the oxen yoke, brings happy hour behind his departing chariot wheels. I.e. people were just behaving themselves, and they worked hard, and they weren't lazy, and they weren't going around being naughty with each other. What has destructive time not rendered worse? Our parents more degenerate than their parents. In us has fathered a still more a rotten generation, i.e. every generation is getting worse. So this is essentially setting up the situation that Augustus is going to solve. Okay, so that is the explanation of that particular source. Okay, so we're going to carry on further down with Suetonius Augustus. Now normally I wouldn't talk you through the Suetonius source, but it is quite long and he is kind of jumping all over the place in terms of his topic. Essentially what the Suetonius source is going to do is talk through the changes that Augustus has made to Roman society and its religion. That's the gist of it. So when we're looking at Augustus and religion, what we're essentially arguing is whether or not Augustus has restored the Republic, and that includes its religion and sort of moral values, but also whether or not he encouraged this imperial cult, this worshipping of himself. So when you're looking at a source like Suetonius that sort of covers the topic in general, keep these two kind of questions in mind. Is he restoring the Republic's religion as it should be? And is he encouraging an imperial cult? I would highlight in the two different colours, but it will take me forever. So I'm just going to read through and highlight as we go through. So starting at 31, so finally on assuming that office a chief priest vacated on the death of Marcus Lepidus, he could not bring himself to divest his colleague, even though he was in exile. Okay, so first and foremost, we know he's now become Pontifex Maximus. The fact that he'd waited until Marcus Lepidus had died, you could argue, shows that he is restoring sort of traditional values. He could have easily taken it off Marcus Lepidus, but chose not to do so. So Augustus collected all the copies of the Greek and Latin prophetic verse, then current, it doesn't make any sense, but okay, the work of either anonymous or respected authors, and burned more than 2,000. So in the information sheet, he talks about this as well. So he basically takes all these unauthorized books, religious books, and burns them because he was trying to cleanse kind of like Roman religion. So he kept only the Sublime books and edited those. So this is quite important. So the Sublime book is like prophetic verses that are in Greek that the Romans would look to when there's like momentous changes occurring or difficulties. So he takes those books but he edits them. Now we don't know what the edits were. We just are told by students that he changes the books, which obviously will allow whatever Augustus to do next to be given sort of to be prophesized that he was going to do it in the first place. So that's obviously a bit of a dangerous situation if you think about it. And he saves them, so that's fine. So then we've got the calendar again that has fallen into confusion. He puts it straight, so that's good. While doing so, he renames a month after himself. Not because of his name specifically, but that's the month when he gets his first consulship. Fine. And then we got some general reforms, so he increased the priesthood in numbers and dignity. Grand. He's particularly generous to the College of Vestal Virgins. So these guys, or ladies, sorry, are the ones who maintain the eternal flame, and the myth or story is that the flame goes out, then Rome will be destroyed. And they are sort of staffed by virginal girls. And they were having real difficulty recruiting girls because you're in it basically for a really long time. And it then meant obviously that families weren't able to sort of get children. So it says that there was death vacancy. Many citizens kept their daughters off the list. They didn't want it to be done. But Augustus says if his granddaughters had been of the right age, he would have proposed her. So he's trying to show that he's really religious, that religion's really important, and then it was to encourage people to sort of go back to traditional religion. So he revived some rights and appointments and gives you a list. We're not going to particularly run through, but there's secular games quite important. So these are supposed to be held every 100 years, and it kind of like brings a rebirth and renewal of the Roman state. Augustus changed it slightly, so it ran, I think it was 110 years to coincide with his rule. And therefore he was able to show that he was the one who restored Rome to its former glory. And then it talks about people not being able to run if they haven't got beards. It doesn't really matter. Fine. Hang on. I get my version of I pre-highlighted this. I can't remember what bits I picked out. There's some of this you can kind of skim through quite happily. So we've got Augustus honours the memory of those who's raised Roman people from beginnings to present glory. So he's showing that these are the righteous people. These are people who should be following their example, which fits in with Horace Odes of like, from rustic stock, etc. So he restores some buildings, he raises statues to them. You can pick out stuff from them if you want to. And he moves a statue of Pompey. So we've got the idea that he shows respect to ancient and long, established rights, but he despises the rest. So any new ones he is not that tolerant to. On the grand scheme of emperors being tolerant to religion, Augustus was pretty tolerant, I should point out. And there's a whole load of information about him sort of essentially not getting involved in some religious disputes, so we'll skim over that because, to be honest, not particularly interesting. So then we got his laws. So these are the Julian morality laws, or Augustus' morality laws, depending how you want to call them. So he brings some new ones, which deals with extravagance, i.e. spending too much, adultery, as mentioned in the Horace Odes, unchastity, as mentioned in the Horace Odes, bribery, and then the encouragement of marriage, particularly in the senatorial and equestrian orders, because they had died out a little bit through the civil wars. So his marriage law in particular, he finds it unable to make it effective because there's open revolt because of its clauses. So there should be an extra information sheet on the morality laws on Classroom. But in a nutshell, the laws were really, really stringent. Men and women had to get married before a certain age. It was quite young. If they didn't, they were fined. And it was really draconian, and people were really unhappy about it, which is fair enough. So it says here, so it shows he's got opposition, which is quite important for a later topic we'll do. So he's therefore obliged to amend or remove some penalties. He also increases rewards for marriages, for children. It's going to sound a bit Nazi-esque, but essentially if you had certain children, you got a certain amount of money. No medals, just money. And also he changes the law to say that you can have 3 years before you have to marry again. But it doesn't satisfy the knights, they're so unhappy. There's demonstration against it, there's repeals, blah, 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 blah. So it shows he's got some opposition to the laws it's passing through, but he is trying to restore kind of like this purity and encourage people to have children, good Roman children. So for example, down here it says, we discovered that bachelors were betrothed to little girls, which meant postponing the responsibilities of fatherhood, and meant marrying with frequent changing wives. He dealt with these evasions of the law. So essentially, but it says a betrothal, sorry. He's pointing out that people were basically trying to they were trying to postpone having children, so he deals with them by passing some laws, essentially. And he also limits divorces. So he's trying to create this kind of more morally upstart, religious society. And that's essentially the Suetonian source. So remember, for some of these sources, you can just skim paragraphs because there's not always a lot in them. So this is a new source for you, which is another poet, another contemporary poet called Ovid. So Ovid's quite an interesting character. He was originally really in favour of Augustus. He was a little bit concerned at first, then he sort of fell for the propaganda and thought Augustus was doing a wonderful job. And then something happened. There's all sorts of rumours in the sources about what happened. What we do know is he did something bad and he was exiled. And in his exile, he turns against Augustus, and he can be really sarcastic in some of his sources. However, the Fasti appears to be very pro-Augustus and quite likes the changes he's made. The Fasti is based around the Roman calendar, so each section of the Fasti goes through basically a month and all the different sort of festivals and religious aspects of that particular month, explaining them. Excuse me. So I'm going to very quickly go through these two Ovid Fastes. Okay, so this one is about February. So February's beginning. So they say, our Saviour Junior, neighbour to, I don't know how to say that name, Mother's Goddess, was honoured in new temples. So we have the idea that we have temples being rebuilt. Where are they now? Those temples on the Kalends longer consecrated have fallen. They lie victims to time's long march. That fits in with what Horace was saying earlier about how the Romans have neglected their gods. However, Augustus is here to save the day. It was our blessed leader's care and providence that all should rest, never be suffered likewise a decay crumbling to ruination. So Augustus has restored religion. He's rebuilding everything. Everything is so much better. Beneath his care, our temples do not feel the searing touch of age, and so he binds by ties of obligation, not to mankind but all the gods as well. So he brings men and gods back together. O Holy One, builder of temples and rebuilder too. So Augustus, aren't you great? This is my prayer. May all the gods repay your care with mutual benefaction. So because you've been so good, I'm hoping the gods are going to help you. Grant you years in heaven to match years on earth you gave to them. May forever at your doors take post as guardian centuries, i.e., hopefully the gods will always look after you. So this is very much, isn't Augustus great? He's restoring religion. Woohoo. So then we move on to Ovid Fasti, the second section of it. So remember, Lares are like guardian spirits, and they have guardian spirits for all parts of Roman life. So like doorways, crossroads, anything needs protection. So think about the doorways, for example. You have a guardian spirit of the doorway to let good people in and keep the bad people out. It's that kind of concept all the way through. So again, this is talking about these religious aspects and what Augustus is bringing back. So the Lares compitales, crossroads of deer, to dogs no less. Lares hunt down thieves. So here's the idea that Lares are protecting us. Diana's hound packs likewise. Sleepless Lares watch by night, sleepless of the dogs. Whew. I sought the two twin statues of the twin divinities and found nothing. Perished they were by time's decay. So yet again, things have been getting really bad. Statues being neglected, so on and so forth. Rome has 1,000 twin lares now, and a leader's genius who gift bestowed them, i.e. Augustus is bringing back safety and security. His divinity is protecting all of us. Every district now pays honours to its three divinities. So there's a little bit of not quite emperor worship, but remember, according to the information I set on the on Classroom, that there's a different aspects of a person you can worship. So you can worship the genius, you can worship the lares, you can worship the Newman. Those are okay because you're not sort of worshipping Augustus specifically. You're worshipping parts of his spirit. It's a really pedantic thing, but it also means that Augustus can say, but oh, no one's really worshipping me, it's fine. So that's what I was talking about. I ramble. It's good to know he admits it. For this theme, Augustus's month lays claim. My song must see to the hymn of the Bonadera, good goddess. And then he goes on about a rock. I don't know what that rock, the crag, is all about, to be completely honest. Here Remus took his futile stance, his brother's gaze, the birds of the Palatine Fasage, the earlier omens. There's this belief that Rome had been cursed because of what happened to Remus. So if you don't know the story of Romulus and Remus, so Romulus and Remus were twin brothers, been raised by wolves. They became the kings of Rome. I won't tell you the whole story, it's not particularly exciting. But essentially, they started to rebuild Rome, and they're both building a wall. And Remus's wall was a bit better, and Romulus was really, jealous of the wall. And then the birds appeared and showed an omen that Remus was blessed, which made Romulus even more unhappy. So Romulus killed Remus, and that's why Rome is named Rome. It's named after Romulus. So the Romans have realised this horrific idea that because they're founded by a murderer, which is what Romulus is, that they're cursed. It's part of the reason why in things like Virgil's Aeneid, they're trying to latch onto the Greek side of things, because it means they're not these evil murderers, which feels that's what Romans are. So that's what that's going on about. So they've been kind of cursed from the very beginning. And there's a bit about temple, blah blah blah. And then we got Augustus's wife, so Livia, restored the shrine. She might never fail to imitate her husband, i.e. she's going to be just as good as him in sort of restoring Rome and making it better, which is lovely. Then there's a nice little chunk of res gestae you're going to read on your own, because res gestae is easy peasy. So in terms of this coin L1, so we've got, to be honest, it's pretty much as it says at the top. So Augustus held 4 different priesthoods at the same time. It had never been done before. It does show that Augustus has complete control over religion. It sets the tone for future emperors as well. If you kind of look through the different, what the 4 symbols show, so we've got a ladle for offerings of wine. So you've got the idea that he's got oversight of state cults, so these are like little religions. So we've got a one for the diviners, so these people who sort of see omens, which is quite important if you're trying to show that the world is in the way it should be going. He's got control over the people who look after those books he edited, so that's handy. I don't know why he's done that. And then there's also someone who looks after the game. So he literally controls every aspect of Roman life, religious life, sorry. So that's really, really important. And this gives you the dates, which you don't have to learn, you'll be pleased to know, about when, he got all the different titles. Okay, so that's a relatively straightforward one. Sorry, just checking my notes. So the Tacitus is pretty straightforward. I apologise for that typo. There we go. So again, in the information, it talks about whether or not Augustus was being worshipped as a god in some of the provinces. So there seems to be the cult of the Augustan Lares. So that's, remember, the protective spirit in Rome, which is technically allowed. So again, it's just an inscription, so you could almost just quote the first bit to show that they are there and that there are priestly attendants. That's all we have to really worry about. So that's fine. And then also we have this altar to another part of Augustus's divinity. It's not a very interesting inscription, to be completely honest. The most important bit is down here, there we go, that they've decided this province, all on its own, this town has bound themselves to worship his divinity forever. And then it goes through what they're going to do on which day, which basically involves a lot of incense. That's about it, really, to be honest. And then if I skim down, again, just the idea that he gives and dedicates the altar to Augustus, and again talks about what will happen if nobody does it. So that's it. You can read the rest of it if you want to, but it's very straightforward. So again, this res gestae bit's relatively straightforward, but do keep in mind that you've got things like the Senate decree, that the vows be taken for his health by consuls and priests. We've got Augustus kind of at the centre of the Republic. If he becomes ill, then everything's going to go horribly wrong. So he's pointing out the Senate's always kind of like, oh, make sure Augustus is healthy because he's done such a wonderful job. They want him to stay forever. And they're celebrating it with games, for goodness sake. What else is there? So he got prayed for the shrines for his health, and he was a sickly guy, but I'm not sure he needs the whole city praying for him, but whatever. And then there's like a whole load of like temples and things that are put in his name, in his honour when he returns to Rome when he's away because they're happy when he's home. So on and so forth.